morning, subscribers. Just wanting to bring to you the final analysis on the F585 pre-release material for A2 Economics, looking at Extract 5. You'll know that this links in nicely to Extract 4, which is all about a transitioning economy, namely Cuba, moving from the command economy system, transitioning into a more open, free trading, free market economy system. So what I'd like to do is to just take you through the key points of this particular extract, and then obviously to propose to you what I think the likely question will be for this particular extract. Remember, this is the big one. This is the 20-mark essay question. Has always been on Extract 5, and there's no reason why it will not be the same in this particular instance. So unfortunately I'm not on the interactive whiteboard today, ladies and gentlemen, so I've got the key points highlighted on my sheet here, and I will just refer to these as we make our way through the extract. So first point to say is that we open up this extract with reference to a global consumer products company called Unilever. Now the fact that it is a global company being embraced by the command economy, that is something which is totally...
Daniel Razai, please come to reception, thank you.
That is something which is totally anathema to planned economies and command economic systems of old. So it's a great example of foreign direct investment into the economy, and indeed as we move through this extract we will see this whole notion of foreign direct investment becomes more and more prominent. This notion of attracting multinational corporations to the country becomes more and more important and prominent. So it then talks about a mega conglomerate. So you'll know that a conglomerate is a company which has many tentacles stretching out into different areas of business. So that is what we mean by an American conglomerate, and in this case it's British American Tobacco, confirming it will build a $120 million facility. So that is $120 million of FDI from the multinational corporation, the MNC, going into Cuba in this particular instance. And indeed they make reference to that here because it says the Cuban effort to attract foreign investment, foreign direct investment, outside of traditional tourism. So here we see the Cuban economy opening up, trying to diversify and trying to bring in other revenues rather than simply being reliant all the time on tourism. And I think the final and most important section in this little paragraph.
Today's concert orchestra is now cancelled due to Year 9 Parents' Evening. Thank you.
Is this section here on price taker. It says that the Cuban economy is a price taker. Now this shows us that the economy is opening up to market forces. It is now demand and supply which will determine resource allocation. It is demand and supply which will determine price, rather than in the previous scenario in the command system where it was the state planning authority which determined all of these things. If you don't know much about planned and command and market systems and so on, do refer to my previous video on said topic. So, Cuba, how far have they come in attracting FDI? Well, we're told they've got a $2.5 billion target, but by the end of the year they only will have achieved approximately, possibly, $400 million. So whilst it's an aim and an ambition, there's still a long way to go in attracting this foreign direct investment. The next paragraph I think is really important, particularly here where it talks about Unilever having a majority 60% stake. Now those of you who have considered public-private partnerships, private finance initiatives, you'll know that in the early days of PFI, one of the key mistakes that was made was that private companies were given a share in the project which was less than 50%, and the state then held the majority share. Now that meant that the private company didn't have much incentive to really commit to the project because their shareholding was not sufficient for them to be sufficiently interested. So the fact that in this instance Cuba has allowed Unilever a majority 60% stake, that will give Unilever a stake, that will make them committed to the project, that will make them hopefully work efficiently, bring costs down, make sufficient profit, and so on and so forth. So that this is a very clever move on behalf of Cuban authorities. And as a consequence of that, we're then told that wages, just move this up a bit, wages are likely to be higher, take-home pay will be significantly higher. Now you in the back of your mind need to be thinking, okay, this FDI, what's it going to be doing to aggregate demand? What's it going to be doing to aggregate supply? How can I model this on a diagram? The fact that the local population will be more technically skilled, enjoying higher wages. How again will this help both aggregate demand and aggregate supply? You've got to be thinking about these things all the time for this particular extract. It talks here about attracting and retaining high quality labour. So those of you who know your German literature, you may be familiar with Heinrich Böll, writing in the 1940s and 50s about working in a post office, and the short story is called Die Postkarte. And in Die Postkarte he talks about the fact that people in the Federal Republic of Germany, so in the command system 70 years ago, they had jobs, but those jobs were fairly meaningless and sort of humdrum. Whereas here we're talking about people being highly motivated, high quality labour. Again, that all adds to the productive potential and capacity of the economy. Similar is mentioned here, but I would like to stress this point. It talks about the production for both domestic and international markets. Now this whole notion of there being international markets obviously means that trade will be taking place, importing and exporting. So think of it in terms of your AD, C to the I to the G to the X minus M. So what's going to be happening to your net exports figure? Again, that's something that you need to be considering. And then finally, Barack Obama, international investors are looking forward to the eventual lifting of US economic sanctions. Now as those sanctions are lifted, that should then persuade investors potentially to invest more into the economy. So there'll be maybe a flood of more capital into the economy, not just in this area but in other areas. And that of course will all add to aggregate demand and aggregate supply. We've talked, I think, in the past about the extent to which sanctions do really become effective and produce regime change, for example. President Xi Jinping, his trade and investment minister, was talking about this on BBC Radio 4 just last week, where he was talking about sanctions being imposed on North Korea and making comparisons indeed to Cuba, saying that Cuba had these sanctions for 60 years and there was no real change. So the effectiveness of sanctions could be called into question in that regard. Okay, ladies and gents. Potential question. So the 20 mark question for this one could be as follows. Discuss the extent to which multinational corporations can be relied upon to deliver economic growth in transition economies. 20 marks. That's what I think the likely question will be. So ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the extracts 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now and I've had a few messages with regard to this. I will try my very best, although time is slightly against me in this regard, but I will try to put together some model answers for all of the questions which I have identified at the end of each of my videos on each extract. If you've got any burning questions that need a quick answer, do fire them off to me. If you'd like me to read over stuff for you, do get in touch and we can maybe sort of arrange that as well. If you want to do a drafting of an essay or something, I'm sure we can sort something out there. So that's it. Bye for now, ladies and gentlemen.